Raising the Bets is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to Raising the Bets, a family podcast of pirates and penguins. We're a Catholic couple raising 5 kids outside of Boston. Join us as we share the joys and challenges of marriage, homeschool, our adventures near and far, as we make sense of the world and experience the best parts of our culture. I'm Dom Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
So we are recording this on an unusual time, the right day, which is a Sunday. We were going to record this Saturday night, but we ran into some trouble.
Poor Benedict had an asthma attack and did not end up getting to sleep until after 11 last night.
Yeah. And then because of that, you missed Mass this morning. I took the others to Mass, and you stayed here with Ben, and you're going to go to the Last Chance Mass at 6.
Yes. He was, poor Ben this morning, he needed another nebulizer treatment. He was still not doing great. And he was so disappointed. He woke up. He was like, I think I feel better. I really want to go to Mass. He got up, stood up, went to go get dressed, and half a minute later was sitting back down on the couch again. He just...
hacking his lungs up.
Poor kid. And so I started the nebulizer. Everybody else went off to Mass. And he said, like, I think 3 or 4 times while everyone was gone, I just want to be at Mass right now. There's one place I want to be right now, and that's at Mass.
The poor guy. He really does actually like to go. He loves to go to Mass. So, it's really sweet.
Yeah. And so being sick and having to miss Mass is a huge frustration and trial for him.
Yeah. But
we went to the doctor and we got some prednisone. So hopefully he'll be feeling better in the next couple of days.
We think it's allergies, right? Of some sort, seasonal or something else, or...
Yeah, I mean, the doctor kind of quizzed me and he said, well, does everyone else in the family have asthma and are they having problems breathing? And I'm like, we do have asthma. Nobody else is having nearly the kinds of problems he has. So it's either a virus or possibly a food allergy that's developing. This is my hunch, but
all we need in this family is another food allergy.
It's a hunch, but I don't have enough data to tell one way or the other. And the doctor kind of agreed with me. Yeah, you don't have enough data. You can keep an eye on it and see what happens.
Because medicine is as much magic as it is science.
Well, at least guesswork.
Yeah, art as much as science. Sorry. Yeah, to all you doctors and nurses out there. But sometimes it feels that way.
It feels like magic sometimes, for sure. And it's frustrating. I mean, I'm sure the doctors themselves, he's sort of expressed his own frustration. Like, I wish that there was just a test we could do and we could say, yes, you're definitely allergic to X, Y, and Z. But really, the blood tests for food allergies, they can give false positives and false negatives, and so they're not really a gold standard.
Yeah. So that's the medical update for the week. And,
I really wish we didn't have a medical update of the week.
We actually did pretty good for a few weeks in a row where we didn't have to talk about health issues with one person or another. But yeah, it caught up to us.
Yes.
Well, the other thing is we've been dealing with this week is Anthony and his bed light. I think this is a fairly common thing with kids who like to read.
Bookworms, yes.
Yeah, and it's almost a cliche. The kid who reads under the covers, except he hasn't discovered the idea of reading under the covers with a flashlight yet. We should not give him that idea.
No.
So they go to bed. Ben is he's an early bird. He goes to bed early. Like he's done by 9 o'clock.
Well, so first of all the kids go to bed at the same time, the big kids and the little kids.
Right.
And they're allowed to leave the lights on and read for quite a generous amount of time.
Yeah.
I usually don't enforce lights out until about
10.
Yeah. Before that, they may fall asleep, but they might also just stay up and read.
Right. So what is supposed to happen is 10 o'clock rolls around, we go to the rooms, usually Anthony's the one who's still up. You go in, say, okay, he's got his light on. He's on a bunk bed. He's on the lower bunk. Ben is on the top bunk. He's got his light on. You say to him, okay, buddy. What you give him you give him a warning, right?
I frequently give him a warning. Sometimes it'll be like a 5-minute warning, or I finish the chapter and then turn off the light. Or if it's really late, sometimes I don't look up at the clock until after 10.
Yeah.
I'll sort of, finish the paragraph, finish the page. I'll stand there while he does it. And then like I'll manually switch off the light when he gets to the end.
Right. So, and as a reminder, we've got Hue light bulbs. We get the smart light bulbs in most of the lights, in their bedrooms and that sort of stuff. So we could turn off the overhead lights, at least in all the bedrooms. But his light was just a manual switch. And he's been good about that for a while, where he'd turn it off, go to sleep, he's done. Until recently, where, you'd go in, usually you're the one turning it off. You'd go in, turn off his light, walk away, then come back a half hour later, and the light would be on again, and he'd be reading again. Sometimes even, and then when you took away his book one of the times, because he was reading it again after you told him to turn on the light, and so he was reading a different book?
Yeah, I came in, I said, okay, lights out. I know that, the night before he'd had the temptation and he turned the light back on again. So the second night, I took away the book that he was reading, which is, the sort of it's a brand new book. I got to see where it happens next. And I understand that. I have been...
I've stayed up all night reading.
Not only as a kid, but as an adult. Yeah, I mean, this is something I do.
So you understand.
Not infrequently. And I understand, but as a parent, I want to enforce a healthy bedtime, especially because if he has schoolwork to do the next day and he's overtired, he gets cranky, and then schoolwork becomes more of a struggle. And
even when you homeschool, you got to get up and do your work. You may not be getting up as early as the kids are getting on the bus, but he still needs to get up early and get his work done. We don't sleep in here.
Well, maybe a little bit.
Well, no. I've heard some homeschoolers, they sleep in.
Okay. Well, I suppose it depends on what you mean by sleeping in. It's kind of relative.
Single digits a week. The single digit hours before 10.
Oh, yeah. No,
He's up. I mean, we generally, all of the kids are up by 8:30.
Yeah.
At the latest. Usually, Sophie's up. She's sometimes up before I am. She's up at 6. I'm usually up 6:15, and she's usually up with me. Ben is early. Lucy is early. She gets up early. Bella is a little later. She's a teenager now, so she's a little later, but she's still relatively early for a teenager.
I expect that to change in the next couple of years.
Yes. I don't expect Sophie to change. She will be up early. Sophie gets up. That was sort of a changing subject. Sophie gets up earlier than everybody so she can eat her breakfast and be away from the table before anybody else comes to eat their breakfast, because she has that misophonia, which means the sound of other people eating their breakfast drives her crazy. So that's the morning. But the night, Anthony, you've caught him a few times turning that light back on recently. And this has sort of become a pattern of disobedience. And so we took the light away, which is a big deal.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't really want to take the light away. I mean, I want him to be able to read in bed because I value that reading in bed.
But because Ben needs to go to sleep, he needs to fall asleep. He needs to fall asleep almost immediately from after he goes to bed.
And most of the time, Ben does sleep with the light on, but I think especially because he's been having the asthma problems recently.
They've had to turn the overhead light off, and Anthony's had to for a few days in a row, 3 or 4 days, he didn't have that light. And we told him, you'll get the light back when you prove to us we can trust you. When you say to us, I'm very sorry, and I won't do that again. But we have to believe you. It can't be, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, which is the usual. Drag it out of him. So he finally, it took 3 or 4 days because he's stubborn as a mule.
Don't know where he gets that from.
No idea. So he finally apologized to both of us. And so I put the light back, but this time I put a Hue bulb in it. I put a smart bulb in it. It goes off automatically at 10 p.m. Comes on automatically at after prayers. I have a post prayer setting on all the smart lights. It's just me. It's efficient. Yeah. The lights, the particular lights come on at the particular dimness setting in the rooms, in other rooms, other lights stay off. It's very efficient. But his light comes on, and at 10 o'clock it goes off. And I've told him, if you break this rule again, we take the light away again, and then you don't get it back for longer, if at all. So I'm hoping we've kind of fixed this particular thing, but we'll see. There's the stubbornness is rising as he gets closer to teenagerhood. This is a particular age, though, isn't it? The 8, 9, 10-year-old age.
It's a hard age.
Yeah,
I think.
So the other big thing that's been going on this week is that you went to the Museum of Fine Arts with the kids. I didn't get to go.
Yeah, unfortunately, you didn't get to go. So our friends who we had over last Sunday, the Arlinghouse family, were in Boston all week touring around. They went to all the great sites. But my friend Erin knows that I love the Museum of Fine Arts, and she basically said, I'm pretty sure that it's not possible to come to Boston and visit the Bettinellis and not go to the Museum of Fine Arts. Like, the Boston experience isn't complete without that.
It is not. So if you come to Boston, you have to go to the Museum of Fine Arts with us. That's apparently a bylaw in the local ordinances.
I think so.
Yeah.
It is my favorite place. So we met up with them at the Museum of Fine Arts, and they had some adventures with taking the tea. Their Charlie cards stopped working, some of them.
Yes. Welcome to Boston.
But they still beat us. But they still beat us to the museum. So they were very on the ball. And their 2 younger kids hung out with us for a good hour and a half, and then they had been promised the Children's Museum, so they
which is another museum on the other side of town.
So they scampered off to the Children's Museum after a while, with their dad. And older brother went off to go. He's a teenager who is trusted on public transportation, so he went off to go have his own adventures solo. And Erin and her 13-year-old daughter, who's been a little bit of an online friend for Isabella, stayed and did the museum with us. And so,
what'd you see?
Oh goodness, we did a brief trip through the ancient world, the Babylonian, Egyptian, Greek.
Oh yeah,
always fun. Little kids really like that stuff. I don't know why. Maybe it's because
pyramids, Egyptians. Yeah.
Right. Then we went to the American wing. I thought the kids might like to see like Paul Revere and George Washington and stuff. That's like...
Right. The portraits.
Yeah.
Also the silver set made by Paul Revere.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool. But, most kids of like elementary school age have name familiarity with Paul Revere and George Washington. So that's always fun. And then...
isn't there a Pollock exhibit?
There was a Pollock exhibit. So after the little kids left, we sort of swung down towards the cafeteria.
Yeah.
After we lingered in the American art room, and then we sort of said, we're getting hungry. Let's wander through there. Now, the fun thing about the museum is, like, as you wander to the cafeteria, you get to go through lots of other exhibits. And so we saw the Pollock, which only had...
This is a couple, like, mural thingies, right?
Yeah, like one big canvas, and then another canvas that was inspired by Pollock. But it was really cool. And then there was a really neat exhibit of the Danish artist and illustrator Kay Nielsen, who did a lot of illustrated children's books. He also was an animator with Disney for a while and worked on Fantasia.
Oh.
And he was one of the visionaries whose art really inspired the Night on Bald Mountain and the Ave Maria sequence.
Ooh, interesting.
In Fantasia. Yeah. So that was pretty fun. They actually had one of his sketches for the Night on Bald Mountain, or not a sketch, but a treatment that was used sort of in planning out the ideas, which was really fun. And the kids enjoyed that one, especially because they recognized some of the fairy tales. There was a Hansel and Gretel and a Snow Queen.
Oh yeah, I saw your pictures of that. Yeah, I mean, he's got a very interesting style. It's sort of not modern. I think modern it conveys a certain style that it's not, but it's hard to say.
I mean, some of his stuff is very much reminiscent of like the 20s and Art Deco style.
Yeah,
but it's not exactly that. There's also a lot that draws on
It's like Gory. What's his name? The one
Edward Gorey?
Edward Gorey.
Not really. I
No.
mean, there's a couple pieces that actually kind of had a gory-ish sort of feel to them, I suppose,
Yeah.
that were much more like women in very circa 1920s dresses. I don't know. Anyway, it was a really good exhibit. And then we sort of wandered through the Impressionists, because you've got to see the Impressionists. The MFA has one of the best Claude Monet
Mhm.
collections, and we've got some Van Goghs and Gauguin and other things like that. Degas' Dancer. We wandered sort of through the Islamic art and into the Korean ceramics and art of Oceania.
You sort of traveled the world.
Yeah, we didn't see everything. I mean, it is not possible to see everything in the Museum of Fine Arts in one day, but
No.
I thought we get a good overview of some of the collections.
And that's not even really the contemporary art wing and all that other stuff too.
Yeah, there's so much there. We did mostly on the first floor, except for the
So,
Impressionists.
did you wipe them out? Did you wipe out Darren?
Oh, we totally did. They'd been going all week. They had done a museum every single day, except for I think the day that they did the Boston Common Public Gardens, Newbury Street walk, North End, massive walking tour.
That is a
Boston.
massive walking tour.
Right. So they were pretty tired.
Boston is a city with a lot going on in a relatively small space. I mean, most people I know who say who come to visit Boston, they talk about how it's a walkable city. Everything is pretty close. And if it's too far to walk, you hop the T and you're there in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I love going into Boston because it really is very friendly. I mean, I think it's probably the most European of American cities.
That's what most people say. Like cities out west I've experienced are just so spread out, because there were no barriers to them. You know, they're just like, hey, it's the open plains, let's go everywhere. Like Dallas kind of is like
Dallas sprawls.
Yeah, it's just kind of lays everywhere. It lays all around. Because there's plenty of room for it. Or even Austin. I mean, there are downtowns in Austin, like 6th Street, and there are concentrations of things, but it's not compact like Boston's, where everything is kind of in one place.
Although Boston's suburbs do sprawl.
Right. Well, but there's nothing to see there anyway. So, I mean, you could go out to Concord and Lexington and that sort of thing, but like most of the suburbs is not really. If you're visiting, Boston, you go to Boston, you can go maybe up to Salem, you go out to Concord and Lexington, but really you're in the city.
Yeah. There's plenty to do in the city without having to leave. Anyway, so yeah. Actually, looking at their pictures made me feel like I want to go do more Boston adventures because.
Well, we keep talking about we're going to do the Freedom Trail.
One of these days.
We've got the second half of the Freedom Trail. So and for people who don't know, the Freedom Trail is a very old. It's been around for like 50, 60 years. It's literally a red line that runs through the city of Boston. That if you follow it, it takes you to all the high points of Boston history, especially history related to the American Revolution, the War for Independence.
Thus, freedom.
Thus, Freedom Trail. And so
most of the time, it's a red brick line, embedded in the sidewalk. Sometimes, in some places, it's painted.
It's painted because it couldn't break down.
but it's really fun because it's like a physical line that you can follow. Like kids love it because you get to literally follow the line.
It starts at Boston Common, the foot of the State House, foot of Beacon Hill. And you follow it. It goes through the city, the old Granary Burying Ground, some of the old Protestant and Puritan churches, King's Chapel, places where
King's Chapel, where the first Catholic Mass was held.
Yes, actually, it's not a Catholic church, but there was a funeral was held for a French sailor in the basement of that church. He died unexpectedly when the French Navy ship was visiting Boston, and there was a priest on board, so they were able to have a funeral mass. Very interesting. John Hancock's grave, the old Granary Burying Ground, and that sort of stuff. And then that goes all the way to Faneuil Hall Marketplace in Faneuil Hall, and that's sort of the first half of the trail. And we've done that. We did that a few years ago.
It was probably about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, there was a stroller involved, so yes. We've been meaning to do the second half, which goes from there. Goes through the north end of Boston,
past Paul Revere's
Revere's house to and then over to Charlestown, where the USS Constitution is, Old Ironsides, and ends at Bunker Hill. It's actually, I think that's a shorter. I think it might be shorter, that part of it.
I think there's longer distances between the points of interest.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
But so it's not as compact. It's actually maybe a longer walk, but fewer points of interest.
I think that's what it really
like
is.
that.
Yeah, I think you have it. So we may do that. Maybe we'll do that. Your mom's coming to town soon, so
If she's up for that much walking,
if
we'll
she's
see.
up for the walking, we'll see if we can do that. And I'll take some time off from podcasting, like a day, and we'll go do that. Other things we want to do. We want to do apple picking. We didn't do that last year because we were on our big road trip.
Right, we were in Tennessee and Kentucky and
Yes.
Ohio and such.
And we want to go back to Berlin Orchards, which is the best apple picking orchard around here, which is also owned by this great Irish family, Irish Catholic family, very faithful people, very nice people, a big family. So we like to go there. A lot of our Catholic friends go there to support them, so which is great. So that's hopefully we get those, in the next few weeks, which would be nice.
One nice thing about going to the museum this particular week is school has just started, so we managed to be there when there were no school trips.
Nobody does field trips the first weeks at school.
Right, it was very, very quiet. It's probably one of the quietest experiences of the Museum of Fine Arts.
Yes, the homeschooler trick.
The cafeteria was empty. At one point, when we were in the like Asian and Islamic arts sections, we were literally the only people in that part of the museum. There weren't even any security guards in that part of the museum. It was just us.
They're a mistake. Well, we're also in that transitional period. The beginning of September is really, it's after the summer crowds, but before the foliage crowds. Not that Boston has all that great foliage, but people come into Boston and use it as a starting point to go up north to New Hampshire and Vermont.
Like my family's done that.
Yes. That's, in fact, probably what your dad and your sister are going to do in a couple next month, which they did last year, actually. Wasn't that last year?
Yeah, last year they came, they stayed with us for a while, then they went up north to Acadia National Park in Maine.
That's right.
And then they sort of wandered back down this way.
Yeah. So I think you got in between those, which is this time.
And it was lovely. I usually don't, because I'm also kind of in that, even though we homeschool,
right.
I get stuck in that idea of September is like start school. I really should be September, time for field trips.
Well, because we homeschool through the summer. We don't take the summer off. We're not as intense. We're never like intense, like every day we must school, where we could take time and go into a museum or a library or, take a trip somewhere. So I think, we can be more relaxed with that sort of thing. So, all right. So that's what we've been doing. Let's talk about what we've been eating. We've been eating a lot of interesting stuff, actually.
Have we? I've almost forgotten.
So, last week we made the Vietnamese meatball and watercress soup, which you like and I like and Sophie likes. Anthony never remembers that he likes until we finally get him to try some. Bella does not like. It has white pepper in it, which has a bite.
I think
it has a nasal burn.
You could possibly eliminate the white pepper, and then it might be more popular.
I suppose.
if you were interested in, making it more popular.
Let's see, make it more popular or taste good to me.
The eternal dilemma.
Yes, I suppose I could add a bunch of white pepper into mine, which I actually still do when I serve it. So I could probably lessen the white pepper in the pot and then add it at the table, which actually would keep it bright white pepperish anyway. So they're little pork meatballs. Pork, they're with scallions in it, cilantro, fish sauce, a few things like that. It's a very standard Vietnamese style ingredients. Nothing exotic. I mean, more exotic than fish sauce, which I think is becoming much more common these days.
It's becoming more common.
A ton of stock. Usually, we double the recipe, but because of the all of us, although we had a lot of leftovers and I was eating it all week, but I'm not going to complain about that because it's really good. But you made some stock because we had to get rid of all those bones that were in the freezer. I mean, it was really good. I like it, and it's got a lot of lime juice that you put it at the end.
Yeah, it's very tangy and tasty, and
I think that might be another Milk Street kitchen recipe, given that it's Vietnamese. if I'm quickly look it up, but so that's a good one. Then we had a problem where the fridge was freezing our lettuces, all our tender greens.
Yeah. We did.
So you made lemonade from lemons with that.
I sauteed. I fried up some bacon, and then I made a bacon fat dressing where I added some sweet white wine vinegar and some onions to the bacon fat. Well, I sauteed the onions and then added some vinegar and a bit of sugar, and then I just threw all the wilted lettuce into the pot and then stirred it until it was like saturated in the dressing, and then put it into a bowl with the bacon sprinkled on top.
Yeah, because when you have wilted lettuces or other tender greens, you just kind of cook them.
Right. And this was like a mixture of like baby lettuces with like the baby spinach and baby arugula and baby romaine and stuff. So they're a little bit hardier than like your iceberg or whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't do this with iceberg or romaine. Yeah, right. You're right. Yeah, the more like the spring mix or that sort of stuff. It's better than throwing it away. That's certainly true.
And it was a little bit different because I've done like a similar treatment with just baby spinach, but this had more of those lettucey flavors. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting. I wouldn't necessarily deliberately do this with a nice crisp bag of baby lettuce, but as I don't have to throw this away meal, it was pretty good.
The alternative is to make a soup with it, to throw it into a soup, but we'd already just had a soup with it.
And it's not really great soup season. Like in the wintertime, we don't mind soup every single day, but it's not really cool enough.
It's starting to get there. Actually, the last week it's been cooler, but yeah, it's not really totally soup weather. So we had that. That was pretty good. The bacon helped a lot.
Everything tastes better.
Everything tastes better with bacon. And we avoided throwing all that lettuce away, which was annoying because we didn't get to have salads all week, but we at least had that. So that was good. I've been trying to cut down on my carbs. I've not been as successful as I've been wanting to be, but when we have pasta, I'm trying to, since Lucy already can't eat wheat pasta, we've been making alternative pastas for her, and I'm going to try to start eating those instead. We tried the chickpea-based pasta. It was a little gritty.
I think
for me,
the lentil pasta, I think, was a little bit more successful.
We had some lentil pasta a while ago, and that was better. And I think maybe we try that again.
Often she eats the rice pasta, which isn't actually a net gain for you with your low carbs.
Rice pasta is still carbs, so I need the protein pasta instead. Which so we'll keep trying that. That'll be, if anyone has any suggestions for a good non-carb pasta, grain pasta, that would be welcome. We'd love to hear about that. So you can email Betts, BETTS at SQPN.com. Then speaking of carbs, the cold oil French fries.
Oh my goodness!
This is a brilliant development.
This came from my Canadian friend Kira,
who serves it with poutine, of course.
Of course, because that's the whole Canadian thing. That's gravy and cheese.
Yeah,
cheese curds. For those who don't know, although they evidently have lots and lots of different varieties of poutine,
but real poutine, yes.
Yeah. So this is a fun recipe. It doesn't actually.
This isn't poutine.
No. This is just the fries. It doesn't take as long as I always think it's going to take twice as long as it really does. And it's nice because you don't have to mess with hot oil except when you're taking the fries out. But you cut all your fries up into your potatoes into nice little French fry shapes. I like the golden potatoes because I think that they're the texture is better.
The starch content of the golden potatoes, like the Yukon Gold, are better French fry potatoes.
Yeah. So I just cut them into, French fry wedgie chunks. I leave all the skins on. Nobody has any problem with skins here. So that has all the vitamins and stuff in it anyway. And then you put them in a big pot. I use my big old Dutch oven. My friend Kira uses her wok, actually.
Ooh, interesting.
And then you cover it with oil with like maybe 1/2 inch to 1 inch of oil on top, so that they're all submerged. And then you put the pot with the cold oil and the cold fries on the stove, and you turn it to high, and it will gradually come to a simmer. I like to stir it a couple times because otherwise you get of those potatoes that stubbornly stick to the bottom of the pot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a delicate operation with a spatula so that you don't burn yourself. I put on my big
Oven mitts. Yep.
And then when they start to turn golden brown, you just dip them out with a spider and put them on paper towels.
Spider, in case you don't know, is a sort of a strainer on a handle. You see it in restaurants a lot in the deep frying.
Especially like in Asian restaurants,
Yep.
like with woks.
But it's counterintuitive. You think, oh, if I just drop this into cold oil, the French fries are going to suck up all that oil and they're going to get all gross and greasy. But that's not what happens. In fact, the science says the opposite.
Right. They're not greasy at all. They're really crunchy, really bright flavor. And I just put some kosher salt on at the end, which I think is a really nice salt for French fries.
Oh, yeah.
There's never any leftovers for those.
Anthony has discovered the joys of kosher salt on vegetables. We trying to get him to eat vegetables is like crazy. But we were trying with table salt. Like, just put some salt on it. It'll taste better. Because kids need more salt for it to taste better. I don't know what it is, but they do.
There must be some science behind that. I should look that up.
I think there is science behind it. So, it wasn't working because our salt shakers would pour the salt out. I don't know what the problem is, but these salt shakers pour salt.
They're not great salt.
They're not great. They're cheap. Amazon specials. But so then I just got the idea. Here, try the kosher salt. And our kosher salt is you use your fingers, pick them up, sprinkle it on, and I was really selling it to him. I don't know what it was. I was like, oh, they're big flakes. Oh yeah, you can be like a chef, sprinkle it on, or I don't know what it was, but I convinced him to try it, and he likes the crunch of the salt and the texture. I think the texture of the vegetables are too soft. I think he likes to have a bite.
That's true. He likes crunchier things, I think.
Yeah. So putting the kosher salt on, I think it's helped with that. So that's good. And then the other thing you made this week, I'll give you the credit. Pulled pork in the Instant Pot with the cola syrup.
I thought we talked about this one before.
Did we? Okay. I forgot we did. But it's
still amazing and
still amazing.
I did
the cola syrup is the brilliant.
Also,
part.
I think the Instant Pot, because I have to tell you, this is one of my favorite things. I did this on the day we went to the Museum of Fine Arts, which was a very long day, and it's like more than an hour drive back and forth to the city, and I'm exhausted by the time I came home, but I had just enough energy to stagger into the kitchen and pull out my frozen pork roast from the freezer. I put it in the microwave just until it was soft enough that I could cut it into chunks, and then I dredged it in salt, chili powder, garlic, and onion powders, and then threw it into the pot to kind of brown a little bit, and threw some onions and garlic in it, and then just the cola syrup on top. And I might have done a little bit of water.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I did. I think I just did the cola syrup. And then I cooked it. It was like an hour and a half cook time. So I went from frozen meat to pulled pork in an hour and a half. That's pretty cool.
Right. And that's the big thing is especially before the Instant Pot, it was like, come home from the museum, too tired to really, and not enough time to really make a full meal, and like, oh, I'll just order pizza. It was what we would do. But now, like with this, we don't do a lot of different things in the Instant Pot. I would like to do more things, try more things. But this is one that is just a perennial goodness. And that cola syrup, which I think we did talk about this back in June a few months ago. So I don't want to spend too much time on it. But the cola syrup was a gift from someone, an older lady who gave it to us as a remedy for coughs, which we never used for coughs, or no, stomach bugs. That's what it was. A remedy for stomach bugs. We never used it for that. But for this is great. I mean, a lot of people will use just like a can of Coke.
Right, and that would be fine too.
Yeah.
You totally do a can of Coke.
But the syrup, I think, because it's concentrated, adds that much more, a little bit more sweetness and less of the liquid, really, because it's syrup and not soda.
Right, there's less water.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah.
I'm just enamored of the fact that it doesn't take the 12 hours that like regular pulled pork does. One thing I do though is I crisp it in the oven after I pull it out of the pulled pork.
Pull it.
I shred it, put it on a big sheet pan, and then stick it under the broiler for a few minutes until it gets nice and crisp. And then I generally pour the rest of the cooking liquid on top of it as it broils.
So it keeps it moist, but gives it some crispy bits. Which
I like the crispy
bits are good. And then Anthony actually has come up with this great topping for it, which is a combination of A1 steak sauce and a barbecue sauce from Tennessee's Barbecue, which is a small chain in the Boston area of Tennessee style barbecue. But I gotta say, it's actually a really good combination.
He and Sophie adore that like A1 plus barbecue sauce combo.
I introduced the boys and Sophie to the joys of A1 steak sauce and pork chops or steak this summer.
My brothers were so into A1 when we were kids that one Christmas they each got a 6-pack of A1 steak sauce.
6-pack
in their stocking.
A1 is the best. It's the tamarind. I'm telling you, it's the tamarind.
It's so yummy.
Yeah. All right. So that's enough about what we're eating. Let's talk about what we've been watching and reading. So we watched together. I've watched a few more episodes than you have, but we watched a new show that's streaming on Amazon called Carnival Row. So it stars Orlando Bloom and Cara Delevingne, French actress who is a former model. And it's sort of a steampunk fantasy, urban fantasy sort of setting.
It's sort of a pseudo-Victorian.
Yeah, late 19th century, really early 20th century story of, I'm trying to think, a world, not our world, different world, where creatures of magic and of fairy tales exist. So pixies, but full size, like human sized fairy with wings. They fly around. Centaurs, pucks. They call them. Is that an Irish term?
English, like Shakespeare's puck.
Yeah, I guess so. But they have ram's horns.
Yeah, these are characters with ram's horns who are some sort of a fairy creature.
So this fairyland. Where the people of the Fae lived, these two warring nations, the Burg, which is the point of view nation, which is really Britain, it's an analog for Britain, versus
specifically London, I think.
Right, versus the Pact, which, Warsaw Pact. It's a totally Nazi Soviet. They're obviously the bad guys, sort of people went to war over the land of the pixie people. The Pact won and forced the Burgish people out. Burg is like the British analog. And now they're dealing the aftermath. And it's really an analogy. What's the word? The analogy story. They're telling it. It's really a substitute for immigration, racism. To kind of address these issues, the humans are generally racist against the Fae and it's not really even just like today. It's like against
it's very much a sort of post-colonial narrative,
right? The Fae are like the Irish. They're treated.
All the Fae characters kind of speak with an Irish accent. Exactly. Most of them do.
The pucks are Scottish. They have Scottish accents generally. There's this very strong analog to how we treat people.
I only saw one episode, but I have to say it felt a little heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And kind of beat you over the head with it. I'm not really opposed to interesting fairy stories that kind of explore these issues.
And especially explore the issues of like how we treat others, how we treat racism and that sort of stuff by taking it out of our context and putting it into a different context. I'm okay with that too. But it was really heavy-handed.
Yeah, it felt kind of preachy at times, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And as you put it, overly dramatic, the relational stuff.
Yeah, it felt kind of the actual character relationships felt
really heavy-handed,
almost soap opera-ish.
Yeah. So
is this a British show?
No, it's so the executive producer is Renee Echevarria, who's Cuban American, who's worked on like Star Trek and Castle and a bunch of other stuff.
Okay.
So I mean, he's done a bunch of things. So it's an Amazon production, and so content warning: there is occasional nudity, there is occasional love scenes, and there's language and brutality. This is gore.
Not a kid show.
Yeah, this is not a kid show, not for the squeamish. So And that's it. I mean, it's not as bad as the one we talked about before, The Boys, which is really over the top with all of these categories. But it feels like everyone's trying to be Game of Thrones. You know what I mean? We're edgy like Game of Thrones, where we kind of show you things because we're streaming. We can do things that you can't do on TV. I don't know. Like, as we've said before, we were talking about I think earlier today. Constraints make for better storytelling. When you can't do certain things, you have to be better at telling your story. Otherwise, as Game of Thrones found actually in later seasons, they like the ability to do all this titillating stuff made it lazy storytelling, and it wasn't as good. In later seasons, there was less of that stuff, frankly, and the story got better. Although I know everyone disputes whether the ending was good or not, but so
I have no opinion.
Yeah, so I've watched a couple episodes. There was one episode I watched last night, so that followed on, which actually was the prequel episode that told the story how the two main characters met and what created the situation, the relational situation they're in. So yeah, I don't know if there's only a couple episodes left, I guess, that I haven't watched yet. I don't know how long it is. I may watch more if I'm bored, but I don't know if I will. So there's that. Then there's another series that just came out on Netflix, the Dark Crystal prequel series. Can I tell you how much I'm over prequels? I'm so done with prequels. Can we tell sequels even? I'd be happy with sequels. Let's tell what happens years later. Did you watch the Dark Crystal as a kid, Melanie?
I must have. I don't really have. I mean, I know I had friends who loved the Dark Crystal.
Same here.
Who adored it. I really don't remember any details of it. I kind of remember big puppets, and I kind of remember
it's Jim Henson puppets.
No, yeah, I sort of I know what it is. I have no concrete memory of what the story is about or anything. I think I maybe saw it once and wasn't paying close attention even at the time I saw it.
It's a sort of fantasy world. You have the Skeksis, or the big baddies who run everything, and they've controlled the crystal that gives life to the world. Then the good guy characters are the Gelflings, which are sort of elves, and there's a couple others, podlings, and some other creatures. And it wasn't big for me as a kid. I remember seeing it, but I didn't see it more than once. I must have caught me at a particular age, like I might have been a little too old, or what. I don't know. It wasn't a thing for me very much. And I have to say, I watched the first episode, so it's hard to judge based on the first episode. They have to kind of establish everything, including for those people who've never seen the original. Okay, so they carry some baggage in that case, but they really committed to doing this with all puppets, just like they did the original. I mean, there's some obvious CGI work that they had to do with puppets like flying through the air. Obviously, they're not puppets aren't flying through the air without CGI. But I had a hard time dealing with the putting aside it's a puppet. I have a hard time buying the Great Warrior puppet Gelfling, like this little, and they kind of, like puppets do, kind of bounce around because they're on strings. And I don't know, I just had a hard time getting past that. Maybe the story gets better, but it's a very complicated story too, like I said in the first episode. So, and I'm, and I spent a lot of it trying to remember what the original was. I should have watched the original again, but we'll see. I may watch the rest of it. I'm not sure. And then the other thing I started watching was the movie Gettysburg, or the miniseries, which is like 16 hours or something. It's like 4.5 hours, but it's really good and really long. So it's going to take me a while to finish watching that. But you had a book you wanted to talk about that for you and the kids was a big deal this week.
Oh, yes. So for a while, the kids have been following Ben Hatke. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm not.
He's a graphic novel writer.
So yeah, he does graphic novels, and also he's in a couple of kids' picture books for kids. And He's a Catholic dad with a passel of kids himself. And so his first one, I think, was Zeta, the space girl. And based on one of his children, his daughter Zeta, and she goes on these great adventures with her friend Joseph. They go out, accidentally get transported to other planets and have to figure out how to find their way home. And so there's 3 Zeta books: Zeta the Space Girl, Legends of Zeta, and Return of Zeta. And then he started another series called Mighty Jack. And so the most recent book, which just came out this week, and probably some of our listeners already know about this, was a mashup of the Mighty Jack series and the Zeta series, where all the characters from both series come together in one grand adventure. And so the kids have been waiting for this. Like, I put it on pre-order, I think, sometime in the spring. And the last month or so, they've been counting down. When is it coming? When is it coming? How much longer?
And then it came this week.
Finally came this week, and there was much rejoicing.
You were out when it came. You had a child at a doctor's appointment or something.
A grocery store.
And so when it came...
Bella, Lucy, and I were at the grocery store, and the other 3 were at home.
Yes. And they knew as soon as it came what it was. For some reason, they held it up to the light. They were looking through the packaging.
They knew it was coming that day.
Right. So I opened it for them and handed it off. And
I think Sophie read it out loud to the other 2.
Yes.
And she'd read the whole thing, but by the time we got back from the grocery store, which was kind of impressive.
Yes.
And then Bella read it, and then Anthony read it, and then Sophie read it again for Lucy's benefit, because Lucy is not up to reading yet.
Right. And you read it.
And then I read it. It's a really fun story. I really like both the Mighty Jack characters and the Zeta characters. So Mighty Jack is kind of a variation on Jack and the Beanstalk.
Right.
So he is the Jack, the defender of the earth, and his job is to keep giants and other creatures from other dimensions from invading the earth. And it becomes apparent in this most recent book that the Jack is actually sort of a title as well as his name.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a huge cast of characters, and it's a very fun romp. I highly recommend them, not only for kids, but for big kids too.
Awesome. Yeah, it's called, they say middle grade, but it's great for everyone. Everyone loves it.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll put a link in the show notes, and you can see it for yourself. So. This is Dom Bettinelli of the StarQuest Production Network, and we need your help. Over the past year, we've grown by leaps and bounds. Some of our podcasts, like Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, are among the most popular shows we've ever produced, but that success is in danger. Creating a dozen shows has caused our expenses to rise, and right now, we aren't making ends meet. We must reach the financial break-even point if we're going to continue. If our reserves are depleted, we'll have to cut back many of our shows. We might have to shut down entirely. That's why it's crucial we hear from you right now. Please go to sqpn.com/give and click the Become a Patron button to make your monthly pledge. If you're already a supporter, please consider increasing your pledge. The need is urgent, so please go to sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give. Let's talk about our bigger topic this week. There's an article that got posted online by our friend Amy Wilburn on Church Life Journal, which is their website, which is from Notre Dame, University of Notre Dame. And as is typical with Amy's writing, it's very good. And the title of it is The Hazards of Online Faith Writing. And it talks about a couple of different things. And it's kind of hard to pin it down to one thing, but it sort of addresses a couple of areas. One is like people who write spiritual stuff for a living, like they write for, I don't know, Guideposts or Catholic Digest or any Catholic magazine or Aletheia or any of these websites,
or Magnificat,
or and this is not a criticism of those sites. Amy herself writes for these sites, but she writes about a danger that's possible for the people who, for the person who writes for them, that what would you say? Like
Well, I think maybe if we back up a step,
okay.
What I liked about this piece was that it starts off being about a particular book. So
Right.
she found a novel from
Wilfred Sheed,
Wilfred Sheed, who was the grandson or
the son of Frank Sheed and Maisie Ward, the Catholic apologist who kind of started the what was it, the Soapbox Society. The Sheed and Ward Publishers was a big Catholic publisher, but they were also Catholic street apologists, and for many years. And then he started. He wrote this novel called The Hack, which is set in 1950s America.
And it's about a guy who, when he was younger, wrote some religious poetry that was highly praised by his friends and family and his parish priest, and it was published. And he sort of got a name for himself as a guy who could write well about spiritual topics. And so he got pigeonholed, and his entire career has been writing for these Catholic periodicals.
Yeah. Or as Amy writes, he makes a living penning pious twaddle for Catholic periodicals.
Yes. And I liked the fact that she uses that particular piece, this work of fiction, to ground her discussion. I've always said that when you're talking with kids about like complicated moral issues, one of the great functions of literature is it allows you to talk about these complicated issues without pointing your fingers at your friends and family and neighbors. You can say these behaviors are, bad or problematic without pointing your finger and saying, look at Joe over next door.
Right.
And so I think that using the frame of the novel allows her to ask these questions without like pointing her finger at any particular real people, either current or past.
Whether you see yourself in this is entirely up to you.
Right. She's not pointing fingers. She's not naming names. She's not calling anybody out.
Right.
And in fact, it really comes across more as a self-examination because she herself.
This is what she does for a living, is not write twaddle, but she writes, as she says, he makes a living writing inspirational stories and poems. And she makes a living writing inspirational articles and books and that sort of stuff.
And I think
and some of us do similar things in other media.
And there's a kind of a spiritual danger that she points out of writing about faith, because your faith then becomes a product that you're selling in a sense.
Right.
And there's a danger in that, both for you and for other people, when faith becomes a kind of commodified.
And and because you are having to write for an audience, you start to shape what you say about your faith for the audience. That you can, and there's that danger in it, and this is where it expands into anyone who talks about their faith in public, especially in online media, social media, or other forms.
Because in social media, really everyone has a potential, at least, to become an inspirational writer if you write anything about like your faith at all.
And so you begin to shape an online persona of I'm this kind of Catholic or that kind of person. That, I mean, there's this whole like authenticity thing, which I don't know that authenticity, quote unquote, is necessarily the end all be all of being online. There's always, I think there's some prudence in holding something back from your public face, from your public expression of yourself. I mean, we don't talk about every single thing in our family or in our relationship on a podcast. I mean, that would not be prudent. But there's a danger in creating a persona that isn't you. That is...
Or not fully you, or not.
Right. I mean, she kind of names some of the personas without naming people. See if I can find one. There's like... the frazzled Catholic mom, here it is, the fun priests doing karaoke, the quirky Catholic, the funky homeschooler, the charmingly frazzled mom, the tattooed Latin mass goer. I mean, these are all personas, which, I mean, maybe you are a frazzled mom.
Right. And then there's nothing wrong with being a frazzled mom,
but it's when you start to create bon mot, and anecdotes or stories to tell in your Facebook post because you're doing it for the audience, because you're doing it for the likes, whether you're doing it for the recognition. That's where the danger comes. And especially when you're putting your faith in that and you're commodifying your faith. It was a really good article. I think it's
and one that kind of, I think that any thoughtful person reading it who's at all active on social media, who's at all interested in writing or doing any writing about faith or talking about it, there's something to be to ponder.
Right. Here's what Amy says. Any kind of ministry, any kind of, including spiritual writing, constantly focusing on the self, on packaging one's life as a spiritual model, even if you continually brush that off and say all for Jesus or something, putting yourself out there, making your carefully composed faux messiness a daily destination for those seeking insight and comfort, making yourself a thought leader whose opinions on everything must be posted as quickly as possible, producing a social media feed you say is about evangelization but is somehow not much more than a wall of photos of your face. It all has the power to form one's own faith in ways that are subtly prideful and do indeed put the focus on us. I mean, that is like that. I know that's caused a lot of self-examination. I looked at that and had to make sure, and not even make sure that I'm not doing that. I need to continually make sure that I'm not doing that.
It's not like a one-time check. Oh, yeah, okay, I'm not doing that. I'm fine.
I mean, I've uncomfortably fallen into some of that in the past, and I need to be careful not to faux package things like that, and carefully composed faux whatever, or the one that I'm more guilty of probably, making yourself a thought leader whose opinions on everything must be posted as quickly as possible. A few years ago I pledged to try to avoid that, to some success more often sometimes than others, put it in a roundabout way. But I did see a number of people kind of posting a link to this article and saying things to the effect of, "Oh, this strikes close to home."
Yeah.
It's a really good article. Some of it I need to read it a couple more times because I need to really absorb what she's saying. There's a lot to unpack in this. I'd love for you, the listener, to give it a read through and to get your feedback, to get your insights into this and what you think of it. I'll put the link in the show notes. It's a really good article. I think a good discussion about this for Catholics in social media, Catholics in new media. It's not just people who make a living doing this stuff, but for all of us who are out there with our faith in public. I think it's something to think about. So good. So I think that about does it for us. So if you've got any feedback for us on any things we've talked about, let us know by visiting sqpn.com/betts. That's BETTS, or the SQPN Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Or you can send an email to betts@sqpn.com. And like I said, I'll put all the relevant links from our discussion on our show notes at sqpn.com. Please remember to like the Raising the Betts on the StarQuest Facebook page, or to retweet it on Twitter where we're at SQPN, and share the podcast with folks. We're trying to grow our audience, and we really depend on you to do that and let other people know you like it. I mean, there's nothing we can pay to promote it. Not that we can afford that, but we could pay to promote it. But really, it's your recommendation to other people that really gets new listeners, and we really appreciate that. So, until next time, I'm Don Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
Thank you for listening to Raising the Betts on StarQuest.